Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
They are here. You are tuned into Night Dreams with the legendary Gary Anderson.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on Night Dreams with Gary Anderson do not necessarily reflect those of the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, its hosts, staff, or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised. Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is The Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. Scientists mystified by massive structures found deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a region of Earth's mantle where conventional wisdom says nothing unusual should exist, scientists have discovered something extraordinary. Using innovative technology to analyze seismic waves, researchers have identified massive structures that challenge fundamental theories about how our planet formed and evolved. It's as if we've discovered a new geological continent, not on Earth's surface, but deep within it. The key to this discovery lies in a sophisticated technique called full waveform inversion, FWI. Unlike traditional methods that analyze only specific types of seismic waves, FWI examines entire seismograms, capturing a more complete picture of Earth's interior. This comprehensive approach requires enormous computational power, but provides unprecedented detail. And that wraps up tonight's top news story. This is Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Well, thank you, Val. Well, tonight we have a great show. We got Richard Dolan on, and we're going to talk about underwater UFOs, whatever they're called. I am so, confused because my age, I don't even know where I put my shoes anymore. But, it used to be flying saucers. Then it was UFOs. Then it was flying discs and all that stuff. Well, tonight it's going to be a great show. JC, in January of 2025 in Congress, in a debriefing, they were talking about a fast-moving object. It was huge.
Yeah, matter of fact, I believe it was the size of a football field, and I think the congressman there out of Tennessee, Tim Burchett, he actually, I think he went on record saying that he thinks there's alien bases underneath the oceans.
Well, what better place to put them? And maybe we'll find that out very shortly. Let's get some information out to you about our guest.
For over 25 years, Richard Dolan has been one of the world's leading researchers and writers on the UFO phenomenon. He's the author of several groundbreaking books in the field, offering thought-provoking insights, analysis, and discoveries that challenge preconceived notions and open up fresh ways of understanding this perplexing subject. His latest groundbreaking work, A History of USOs, Unidentified Submerged Objects, Volume 1, From the Beginning to 1969, is the first installment in a 3-volume series meticulously researching and documenting 178 cases of mysterious objects observed in bodies of water spanning centuries. His massive 2-volume history, UFOs and the National Security State, has permanently altered our understanding of the history of UFOs and the government cover-up. UFOs for the 21st Century Mind remains a definitive single volume exploring the full range of the UFO subject in all its complexity. In The Alien Agendas, a speculative analysis of those visiting Earth, Richard makes a unique contribution by analyzing the beings behind the UFO phenomenon, examining the long history of our encounters with them. He is also the co-author of the classic book AD, After Disclosure, which ignited a conversation on how UFO disclosure could take place and its potential global impact. Richard's knowledge of UFO history is second to none. His approach to the UFO subject focuses on 3 basic pillars: the sightings themselves, the politics of the cover-up, and the long-standing attempts by citizens to end UFO secrecy. He has spoken at events around the world and is the recipient of 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards at major UAP conferences. Beyond his written work, Richard Dolan shares meticulous research and engages in enlightening discussions about intelligent disclosure through various media. He continues working on book projects while managing an active website, richarddolanmembers.com, which features fresh writing, video, and audio content.
Whoa, Richard, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me here. I'm hearing some feedback, so I've got to kill that somehow.
Oh, that feedback should drop off after about a second. I got a 15-second delay here. That's okay. Case somebody on call-in says the wrong thing. I got a 15-second to clear it.
Gotcha.
I got to ask you a couple major questions. How old are you when you got 62. Interested? You didn't let me finish. Well, I'm going on 74.
All right, sir.
Or 47 if you reverse the numbers. How old are you?
To respect my elders.
How old were you when you got interested in UFOs, and what caused you to get interested in the subject?
Oh, that's a good question. I was in my 30s when I first started thinking about the subject seriously, so that would be the early 1990s. And I was, at the time, trying to have a totally different life and career. I was on a path to wrapping up a PhD in U.S. diplomatic history. And so I was all about Harry Truman and the Cold War and everything having to do with the birth of the CIA and everything like that. And I was in a bookstore. I'll never forget this. And on one of the display stands was a UFO book by the great Timothy Good called Top Secret. And it was a subtitle that caught my attention, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. And I remember flipping through the book thinking, this is a pretty interesting book, because what he did, for those people who read the book, they know, but Tim Good put together a very solid case of a kind of international UFO cover-up and international UFO engagement. And the thing that got my attention was he had a lot of names and departments that I had been studying at that very time. And it was a bit shocking, to think, am I dealing with a schizophrenic type of history here? There's official history that I was trying to learn, and then there's this other stuff, like, was this true, was this not true? Were these departments, were these people genuinely interested in UFOs? And if they were, how come I'd never studied it in the academic world? I was very curious about that because it seemed important. And then the other question that I wanted to know is, did they ever figure this out? Did they resolve it? Did they just, do some studies and say, oh, we know what this is? So I got really interested in, this is the early 1990s, And my initial goal was just to maybe spend a couple of months and go down that rabbit hole and see what I could learn. I was not expecting to spend the next 30 plus years of my life doing this.
Yeah, well, you know how it is. I've been doing this, God, over going on 58 years. I've been in radio since I was actually 12 years old. But I mean, when you really think about stuff like this, it is a long time the subject has been going on. Do you remember the time when you even talked to somebody about UFOs, they would look at you strangely?
Oh, yeah. For quite some time. In fact, the entire first year that I was seriously diving into UFOs, I had a side business for many years, and I would have customers. I actually would write professional resumes for job seekers. It's what I did to make my money for that period of time. And so I'd had hundreds of people coming in. And I remember for the whole first year, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my wife at the time. And then I finally told her, and I finally told my some family members, my parents. But it was one of these things, like I just did it on the sly for at least a full year. And then I would talk to individuals when I was starting to come out, as it were, into the subject, and kind of feeling out the response that people would give. And what I found was most individuals were kind of interested. At least they were interested once they heard why I was interested. But there was always a certain percentage of people who would look at me like, all right, this guy's a couple of cards short of a full deck. So I did get that response as well, for sure.
Well, there's so much going on out there, and everything from drones, and I think they're muddying the water to keep us totally confused. But again, I so many people are naive. They think that we are the only intelligent life, period. There's no life out there. And they are so wrong. And, we are being visited. And, like our oceans, if I was an alien race, and who knows how long they've been here, they might have been here longer than us, that the oceans would be a good place to have their bases. What's your feeling?
Yeah, the oceans could be a fantastic place. And I've been doing this USO study now. It took me about 3 years. And it's been an amazing bit of research, a real mind-blowing experience, to be honest. But yeah, as far as with the oceans, I would agree with you. There's a lot of good reasons why the oceans would be very attractive for any visiting intelligence. The oceans provide a much more stable environment in many ways than the atmosphere would. You get less temperature fluctuations, you get less pressure variations, you get protection from the solar radiation. If you are not designed to handle our sun's particular level of solar radiation, the oceans might be a much safer place for all of those reasons. And then, of course, if you are studying these human beings who are scurrying about planet Earth, very inquisitive, we look at everything, we try to notice everything, the oceans might be a good place as well. It's a little bit more secure than on land. So I think there's a lot of good, attractive reasons why the ocean would draw visitors.
Well, we haven't even researched or mapped a lot of the oceans.
That's right.
So, I mean, again, and the depth of some of those spots in the ocean. We don't have no capabilities to send sonar or whatever waves down to see what could be down there. Two is it's so deep we can't go down to investigate.
It's difficult. I tried to study like how much of the ocean is shelf, so a bit more shallow, and how much is just the deep ocean. And I think roughly 10% of the ocean, maybe 15% of the ocean is ocean shelf. So that goes down, less than 1,000 feet. Could be a couple of 100 feet. But then when you get down into the depths, you're talking, 15,000 feet, roughly 3 miles in much of the world. And that is, as you say, it's very difficult for us to get down there. And in terms of how much we have mapped, this is something I learned from Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who explained this to me. We've mapped scientifically roughly about 25% of the ocean floor, mapped it to a degree that scientists are satisfied. But in terms of ocean volume, he said, roughly 5%. has been, I don't know how you even map the ocean volume, but this is what I'm told. 5% of the ocean volume has been mapped in some adequate way.
Well,
so there's a lot that we don't know.
That's the whole point. And again, if I was not from this world or advanced civilization from this world, because we don't really know what they are at this point, that would be the perfect place to get away from humanity.
Well, it's one of several good places. I mean, I've often thought, inside mountains, underground. I mean, there's places they could go, but I definitely do think the oceans they're absolutely in play. Yes.
Well, there's been so many reports. I've had a guest on who was on a nuclear submarine as he was doing work for the government, and a fast mover went by. Mm-hmm. And, he heard the exec say, we have a fast mover going around 300 miles an hour. And
is this the Mark D'Antonio?
Yes,
account? Yes. Yeah, I know. I've spoken with Mark about this. And in fact, I'm including his account in the third volume of this series. So, yeah, I'm very well aware. But it's an interesting story. He's never given the exact year or location, which I understand that. But he was a guest on a nuclear submarine and did hear was present for a conversation about a fast mover. And he's pretty funny about it when he describes it. But he said, I was thinking pretty high of myself. And I said to the XO, if there's anything I can do to help, sir. And the XO basically said, you don't do anything. And if you want to have a good time here, don't say anything else.
Yeah, that's what he said on my show. And the interesting part about it, too, is that when the exec told the captain, do you want me to log it in the book? And the captain said no.
Yeah.
So something is going on. And it's not just from submarines. It's been, off of different Navy ships worldwide have reported lights following them, bright
Absolutely.
Lights and the big objects. So something is going on.
In the study that I've just completed, I've recorded close to 700 USO encounters over basically the last couple of centuries. Most of these are, after World War II, and many of them have connected to the United States Navy. I've got quite a few U.S. Navy accounts, and it's absolutely true. I mean, whether it's a submarine or an aircraft carrier or any other type of ship that the Navy has out there, they all have encountered these things. They are sometimes just strictly under the water. Sometimes they will emerge from the water. They will enter the water. There's a high percentage of electromagnetic interference for Navy ships when they encounter these things. About 1 out of 5 instances have some kind of EM interference, it looks like to me. So there's a lot of interest that these other intelligences have, and I think they're particularly interested in things like weapons, and they're interested in tracking our technology. I'm quite convinced.
Well, that's what I think too. Even Tic Tac, when you look at that, I really think that could be connected to underwater fast movers. Really?
Yeah, the Nimitz encounter of 2004, the Tic Tac UFO. Yes, I think there's a lot of, let's say, consensus that there was a large object under the water when that whole thing happened. And the Tic Tac UFO, which was the aerial object that Commander Fravor and his team saw, that was part of the encounter. But there are a number of people who've stated that there was a large object under the water as well. So that would make it a USO encounter.
Do you think the military, Richard, is trying to suppress these encounters with UFOs?
Oh, in my mind, there's no question about this. I mean, whether UFOs or USOs or however we want to describe these things, the United States military has been dealing with this mostly unsuccessfully, I think, at least since the 1940s. I think that's really when they started becoming overtly aware of this. And they have never, ever wanted to acknowledge what's going on. They don't have control over it. These objects invade sensitive airspace at will. When I broke into this field back in the 90s, when I wrote my first book, UFOs in the National Security State, that was my number one focus, which was military encounters and airspace violations and locating the government documentation that supported those. And there's quite a few. There's a lot of these encounters. But of course, at the same time, the United States government and the military, the Air Force back then especially, made one public announcement after the next, just saying there's nothing to this. It's hoaxes, hallucinations, misidentifications, and so on. But what you learn when you study the declassified documents, and we've got a number of them, we've got a good cache of declassified U.S. government documents now. They tell a different story. And they tell a story of military pilots who are sent to intercept these objects. They typically would fail. The objects would display capabilities vastly beyond anything that we could do then or now, frankly. So this is an old story. And with the USOs, and that's primarily, of course, encountered by the navies of this world, the U.S. Navy, how could they possibly ever want to discuss openly this? I mean, I'll give you just a couple of examples why. A number of cases I found dealt with U.S. aircraft carriers that were temporarily, seemingly disabled by these objects. There's one account I have from 1954, the USS Franklin Delano Roosevelt aircraft carrier, in which one of the officers of that ship, years later, anonymously, this is where you get a lot of these stories, wrote about the account in a fair amount of detail. In fact, minute-by-minute encounter that the FDR had where a large cigar-shaped object descended from above, hovered over the ship for a short while, zipped back up, then came back down, and these two saucer-like discs came out of the ocean, hovered around, and then entered the large cigar-shaped craft, which then entered the water. During that whole process, none of the weapon systems work. So they were going to launch at least one or two of the aircraft on board to intercept and deal with this. They were not able to launch. There's another account that I have quite detailed from 1971, the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier, just north of Puerto Rico when this happened.
Now, that was a nuclear aircraft carrier, correct?
I would say what? I'm sorry?
Nuclear propelled, yes.
That's right. And around 8 p.m. on July 2nd, it was dark, but the crew members start going crazy. The guy who ran communications described this in great detail. He said all the communications suddenly went to gibberish. Nothing worked, so there's no messages going in or out. That was for about 30 minutes. And he heard people screaming on the intercom to the effect of, "It's God, it's the end of the world." So he wanted to know what's going on. He goes out and sees this glowing red sphere giving off about half the amount of light of daylight, he said. And it was just there, just hanging out right over the ship. They went to battle stations. He had to go back to his communication station, so he wasn't able to look at the object anymore. But for the next 20, 25 minutes, all the comms were down. This is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Communications go down for any period of time, especially for close to a half hour. You've got to assume that went all the way up the chain of command, probably to the president himself. I mean, he would want to know such things. So this is just, one of these instances in which, you put yourself in the position of the Navy and you wonder, how could they possibly want to discuss this or admit this to the public?
And
I can't imagine they would.
And Richard, I find so interesting too, when an aircraft carrier is out, they're not there by themselves. They got a whole bunch of protection of destroyers and all that there with them. Could you imagine? It wasn't just seen by the people on the aircraft carrier, it was on all those other ships.
It's very likely so. And in fact, and in the case of those two ships that I just described, I'm not aware of what other ships were nearby. But there are instances that I have found in my research where you've got battle groups out there. You've got a small part of a fleet where numerous ships would also be witness to whatever was going on.
How do you think they manage to keep it hush hush? Do they maybe use threat on the sailors and everybody that was involved? It witnessed it. an experience?
Yes, definitely. Definitely in many of these cases. I mean, I'm just going by the accounts that Navy personnel would describe, years after the fact. And they all tell a very consistent story, which is that, yes, they are either they were explicitly told not to say anything whatsoever under, whatever penalties were described to them, or they just said, look, we knew not to discuss this because this would not be helpful for our career. So you get a lot of that as well. I think, people in the Navy, they understand very well. You do not just go talking about these things willy-nilly, but yet some of them do. And not all of them wait 20 or 30 years after the fact. Some of them do, but other of these stories do come out, pretty soon after. So it's varied. But in terms of keeping the secret, this is the entire UFO phenomenon we're talking about here. Governments do keep secrets. I think we all understand that at this point. And that is the nature of the society that we live within. We have governments, and particularly the United States government, which is in the business of running an empire. They're not in the business of just giving up all of their secrets.
No, they're not going to. And that's the scary part. A lot of people think we're going to get major disclosure. There's certain people out there who are saying it's going to happen next week, next month. They've been saying it for years. I don't think we're really going to get any real major disclosure. Richard, I don't know how you feel about that.
I go back and forth on it. I've wondered about this subject for many years, disclosure. And indeed, there are individuals, some of them are good friends of mine, who are convinced it's going to happen any minute. And I've had long-standing, years-long conversations with a few of them about this. I guess I would say that it's not impossible that something breaks out now. I mean, this is a different era that we live in now compared to, say, a decade ago or more. At least now we're having a much more open conversation about this subject. It's not fully open. There's still a lot that we need to cover, but it's better than it used to be. And more than that, we're in an era where we're seeing a greater number of, for lack of a better word, let's say whistleblowers who are coming forward to talk about what they know. So I think all of that is positive. And I mean, think of it this way. If we were to go back 10 years ago and we were to learn that in the next few years, like the Navy would admit that they've tracked UFOs. We'd have a bunch of Navy people talking about their UFO encounters. We'd have the U.S. government admitting that it had several UFO offices like ATIP and OSAP and so on. And all the other revelations that have come out, David Grush and everything he had to say. I think many of us would have thought, oh, well, hell, there's going to be disclosure. That's disclosure. There's no way you can't have disclosure. And yet what's amazing is how much information has come out. And we are still at this kind of in-between stage. In fact, we're not even there. We're at the he said, she said stage. We're like, some people think that there's intelligences out there, but we're not really sure. That's kind of where we are at. So what I think is remarkable is the establishment's ability to maintain as much control over the narrative as they have done. And it's really quite substantial. They know how to play good defense. They are very good at that.
I know. That's the good thing. Anyway, we need to take about a 2-minute break. We'll be back with Richard Dolan right after this. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. So stay tuned.
Time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies, UFOs, UAPs, in the air and on the ground, bridges in liminal spaces, cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure: you don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Now available on Amazon from author Kevin Paul. Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Read this captivating book as soon as you can by author Kevin Paul.
love you, girl, I won't make you cry. I turn around, he gives my best girl the eyes. He says, I'm home, baby, I'm watching the game. I see him pouting on his friend's Instagram. He says, I'm staying in bed, I got a virus. He says his ex-girlfriend is Miley Cyrus. Says I'm an agent with the FBI.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
And we're back with Richard. Now, Richard, is there any particular ocean that has more reports to these USOs?
Well, yeah, I mean, in my own research, I would say the Atlantic Ocean probably has the lead. Pacific Ocean is close behind. The thing about the reports is, what I find is that they're really dominated by American citizens, American people, who are way more likely to report these than people in other parts of the world. Not exclusively to them. I mean, there's other reports coming in elsewhere. But there's a very strong skewing toward U.S. witnesses. So, I try to keep that in mind when I'm asking myself, where's the real action going on? But I must say there's a tremendous amount of action being reported. I would say in order, in terms of hotspots, the area around Puerto Rico might be number one. But also the area around Florida is very, very heavily represented on all the sides of Florida, of that peninsula, going all the way up the northeastern coast of the U.S. from, say, the mid-Atlantic range, all the way up through like Nova Scotia. The whole area is very, very active. On the west coast of the U.S., you certainly have the area around Catalina Island and south, going down toward Baja California is quite busy. But then you go to other parts of the world. There's a lot of reports in the north central Pacific along the Aleutian Islands, and then you get into the western Pacific near Japan. The South China Sea has a lot of reports, and a lot of reports I'm finding off the coast of South America on the Atlantic side. But there's really not a part of the globe where we're not getting some of these USOs.
Now, has anybody like on a cruise ship or any cruise ships or any seen these things? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm thinking ahead to the third volume of my study, which has not yet been published, but I can think off the top of my head of several cruise ship witnesses in the 1990s and in the 21st century. I've got cases going right up through 2024. So, cruise ships for sure. Could you imagine you're on a cruise ship to really relax and enjoy, the cruise, and all of a sudden people are saying, "Ooh, there's a UFO right out there."
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine?
It happens. It absolutely happens. Yeah, and I wish if I had known beforehand, I would have had a couple pulled up. But I mean, just from memory, there's more than a handful. So if you take a cruise, keep looking outside because you just might see something. Yeah, but if you saw a USO looking out the portal or looking out from the deck, you're going to want to get off that cruise ship fast as possible. I mean, could you imagine the fear a lot of people would have? Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, you get all kinds of reactions by witnesses of these things. There is definitely what you could call the fear factor response, people getting really, really upset when they encounter this. But then there's other instances where folks are just very unusually calm. In fact, sometimes they will comment and say, I don't know why I was so calm. I mean, there was no reason for me to be. I've often wondered if there's some kind of cognitive manipulation going on in those cases. But I think a lot of folks they describe being very curious and very interested. And at times, they'll often feel like this thing's interacting with them. I mean, there's definitely a number of cases like that, too. If you really think about our Navy submarines and the Russian submarines, which are supposedly really technology advanced,
Could some of these sightings actually be, a Russian sub? Has anybody checked into that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, particularly when you look at the U.S. Navy cases, I mean, they're always wondering about this, especially during the Cold War, where I get a lot of these cases. You're the U.S. Navy, you see something unusual coming in. Yes, you're absolutely going to wonder, was this Soviet or Russian? The thing is, like, when I look at the difficult cases, the ones that I selected to include in this study of mine, they seem way too difficult to translate to, like Russian submarine or Russian technology. Honestly, some of these objects are tracked just going way too fast. And by the way, the Russians have their own large number of stories, and in fact, I've collected as many of those as I can. I was fortunate to get a copy of a very fine Russian book on the subject, which I was able to get translated. And there's a lot of information. The Russians have had their own long history of this. During the 1970s, particularly, they encountered something that they called, I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce this, the kavakari, which was their word for croakers, and they gave it that name because these things made a croaking sound under the water. So they're, you're in a Russian submarine deep under the water. You hear this croaking. They're tracking it on sonar, and these things are sometimes circling around their submarine under the water. The Russians wondered, is this American technology? But they determined it could not be. And you get the same thing with the Americans. There are numerous accounts of American Navy exercises going on where they will encounter some kind of fast-moving object. And sure, they're going to wonder, is it Soviet or Russian? But I can just say in the cases that I've collected here, it does not look like that at all. And it doesn't seem that the U.S. Navy personnel thought so either.
How hard has it been for you to come up with all these sightings and information for your books?
Well, I kind of traipsed into this field about 3 years ago, the USO part of it. I have a really great website with wonderful members, and I was asked a question about one particular event that was a USO event back in the 1940s. And so what I would often do from my website is I'll create little video presentations for them. And I did it on this. And then I thought, well, let's do a couple of others. And I just wanted to look for USO cases. And I quickly realized, like, I had to scramble around to find them because they are scattered everywhere. So I learned that there's a few major databases where I could find good USO cases. One was on the website of the late Carl Feint, who was a very fine researcher who focused on UFOs and water. And he had a very good book and a now kind of semi-functioning website where he had a pretty big database. I went into the National UFO Reporting Center website I love to go through, and just went through thousands and many thousands of cases there looking for water-based accounts. And then I was very fortunate to have access to the MUFON database, their CMS, that's their case management system. And there are quite a lot of cases there. And then just scattered throughout old magazines that are out of print, old books. And I just, went on a mad hunt and tried to gather them all together to the best of my ability.
How long did it take you?
About 3 years. I started in 2022, and I've just published the first volume about a month ago. Although I would hasten to add, all of the cases are written. They're all done for all 3 volumes. And for the next 2 volumes, I'm just kind of organizing them into chapters and introductions and things like that. So they'll be out soon. But it's a 3-year project.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. We got a caller. Caller, you have a question for Richard about this?
Yes, sir, I do. My question is, how many, if you have any information on this at all, how many different alien races or species have been identified by the U.S. government? Do you have any information on that?
No, I would not even know how to answer that. I mean, first of all, the U.S. government, officially speaking, of course, will say that there are no alien races that they have identified. This has been their go-to for decades. Unofficially, there's all kinds of talk and speculation about what is out there. There's been all sorts of individuals over many years who have their own answer as to how many alien species or races there are that are here. You know, from anywhere from 1 or 2 to 57 or more. It's really hard for me to know. I will say that in my own research, and particularly in some conversations I've had with a few people connected to the government and the intelligence community who may have reason to know, I do get the idea that they think that there are several types, multiple types, but how many? That it's an important question, but of course it's still quite speculative on everyone's part. So I don't really know. I mean, if there's a definite source, they haven't spoken to me about it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know,
That's a tough question. That's a good question, but it's a tough one to answer. My own opinion is that there are multiple groups that are here. And furthermore, I think that they're here for a very particular reason, because I think we, human beings, are at a point of our development where we're actively getting some attention.
well, maybe we're at the point, we're at the end of our, civilization too.
Well, we're on a tightrope, aren't we? So we're either going to extinguish ourselves or continue developing to the next, whatever quantum level of technology that there is. I mean, it's only been a few generations that we go from basically getting out of wooden huts to where we are now. It's not really that long a period of time. So it's been quite a remarkable trajectory that we're on. And I can only imagine that any observing intelligence has got to be got the popcorn out, and they're watching us very carefully. And they may have their own opinions on whether they think what we're doing is awesome or terrifying or, all kinds of opinions. Some of them may think, hey, we could do a better job living on Earth than these humans. Who really knows?
Well, maybe they might want
sure.
our planet too. You got to think it that way. We got another caller. Who do we have?
We have Art here.
Hi, Art.
Yes, this is very fascinating to hear USOs versus the UFOs and having similarities inland. I'm in Orange County, California, and my area is near Seal Beach Naval Shipyard, and there's a bunker depot about a couple of miles away from me that they hold the ammunition, and then further inland is the Los Alamitos Naval Air Base, and then to the south of me would be Catalina, and my view towards San Pedro. But my question is, the crafts. I had a lot of encounters with UFOs, and they weren't really always orbs, but they were like the 14th century painting of that man in the craft. It's that cone shape with the spikes on the rear of it, and it's and I saw one pop out right over towards Catalina coming to inland. And my friend was in my vehicle, and he passed out. And as soon as it disappeared, he woke up. And then there was the cigar shape. I sent Gary one. It was right off my balcony where I'm at, and I got a couple of others of the cigar shape. And then there's the cube bar. It's like a cigar shape, but it's rectangle. And I got to see at least 3 of them, where not just that, but these crafts transform into commercial and military aircraft right in front of me. And so the ability to do that, and I met other people who also showed me a video of 2 aliens looking right there in a craft right in front of his house. And, amazing that you can see these things. That you said something earlier about they're kind of like your contact, and as soon as you contact with them, they either wanting to take off or disappear, or they stop in their flight. Like you get that feeling that they recognized you were, you're there. They got spotted. So I wanted to share that with you. But in my question would be, we have the black stealthy craft, that the triangle and the chevron. I saw a big domino shape, like the size of an aircraft carrier, and it had the tower on it. That's why I kind of say it like an aircraft carrier. And in my area, and it just seems that they come in and come out differently. They flash differently when they leave, or they disappear differently. So I just wanted to get what you know about all that issue.
Well, I really appreciate your call, because you had a lot of interesting things to say. First of all, you're in a significant hotspot of activity, as you well know. And, that area, as you were pointing out, is very heavily military. So one of the questions that everyone's naturally going to ask is, when you see one of these crazy, weird UFOs or USOs, is it military? I mean, it's a normal thing to wonder about, but I suspect we have a similar opinion on this, because some of these objects are just far too strange. They seem far too difficult to explain away as military. And in fact, the reports that I have go kind of far back, so it makes it very difficult for me to square that with military craft. I tend to think that they are active where militaries are active. I think that they're actually interested in what the military is doing. In terms of the shapes, by the way, I did a very, very detailed statistical breakdown of the nearly 700 accounts that I've collected. I put in about 15 data points for each case. I created a spreadsheet, looked for patterns. What I can tell you is about a quarter of them all are described as disc-shaped or oval, kind of like a flying saucer. About 9 or 10% are cigar or cylinder-shaped, or described in that way. Smaller percentage, maybe 5%, are triangular or conical. And then there's others. There's some where you really can't get what the shape is. It's hard to know. Some are just described as a light. And about 20% are spheres or orbs, very distinctly described in that way. So there's a variety of configurations of these. They all seem to act in very extraordinary ways. So instant acceleration, transmedium capabilities, and by that I simply mean they can operate equally well in water as in air, as in the atmosphere. So we don't have anything that can do that equally well in water and air. So and in terms of the behavior, I think you described that. I'm kind of on board with what you're saying, which is that there's not a lot of overt hostility that I have really been able to note. Yes, there is a fair amount of electromagnetic interference that these things have, and it's amplified on military vessels. So you could interpret that as hostile in a way, but it's not hostile in the sense that they're firing weapons. They do seem to have a curiosity. They are interested in tracking what we are doing. And that you don't have to be military for that. There's people out on boating expeditions and on cruise ships and whatnot, or fishermen and the like, and they are also noting that there's curiosity or some sense where these objects appear to show an interest in the witness. In fact, that's one of the things that I tried to track. And that's subjective, I will admit that, but I try to, as realistically as I could, ask myself, did the object show an interest in the witness? And that's in, I think, 40 to 45% of the cases, almost half. In my opinion, the object showed an interest in the people who were observing it.
That is so interesting, too. Now, one thing I've noticed doing this for years is, when I first started talking about UFOs and all that back years ago, people were talking, they were 25 to 75 feet, disc shape. Now I'm getting people saying, well, they're big as a Walmart store. They're triangle. My late friend Art Bell had an encounter twice, actually, with a triangle type of one. It moved really slow and then it sped off. I mean, it's why such a big variance?
Well, that's another thing that I tracked. I created a just small, medium, large. So for me, small was anything that was too small for one person to fit into. Like, a basketball size orb would be small. Medium was, for me, I just did this arbitrarily, but anything that was like up to 50 or 60 feet in diameter. And then large would be anything bigger than that. And a fair amount of them were large. In fact, large was a bigger category than medium or small. There's a lot where the witness would not give the size or they wouldn't indicate the size, so I can't really tell. But large, a lot of them were larger than 50 or 60 feet in diameter, a fair amount.
Yeah, but, again, from years ago, 25 to 75 feet in diameter to the size of a Walmart store. Either we're being visited by another species of a race that has even more advanced technology. Yeah,
even going back over the decades, there are some reports of very, very large UFOs. It's true, but I think you're probably right. You're probably onto something where some of the earlier cases might have had a preponderance of sort of mid-range or smaller size craft. It is true. There's a variety of the sizes, and you know in that 1954 case that I mentioned earlier with the FDR in the ocean, there was the cigar-shaped object that the officer described. He said was something like 300 feet long, estimate, whereas the discs that went into it were obviously smaller. So they come into all of these sizes, and you're naturally left to wonder what is the purpose of the large ones as opposed to the smaller ones. Large ones are often described as like motherships, and it is true that a lot of these larger craft will emit smaller craft out of it. There's one case that's in my third volume, which is not yet published, from I think around 2009, on the shore of Sicily, so in the Mediterranean, near what's called the Strait of Messina. Looking at the Italian mainland there. So it's afternoon. You got three guys working on a house. They're renovating a house. So they're just nailing down the roof, whatever they're doing. And they hear, it's broad daylight. They hear this, I'm trying to remember this, a hissing sound. And they see this large ball-shaped craft. It's a total sphere emerging from the sea, maybe half a mile from their position. They get a very good look at it. It's like a lead gray in color. It's totally smooth. It's reflective. They think it's very large. They're estimating it's maybe like 50 meters, which is like 150 feet or more in diameter. Very large. And then the thing is, it ascends straight up to a certain distance. It hovers, and then it released like 8 or 9 smaller UFOs. They might have been smaller spherical objects. I'm not quite sure, but they just took off. They went toward the west part of the Sicilian coastline there. And then the larger spherical UFO just slowly descended and submerged back into the sea. That was reported to the Italian UFO Research Center in the city of Messina. And there was a PhD who actually investigated it, commented on the significance of it. It seems to be a legit case. And you've got this large thing coming out of the ocean, releasing these smaller things, and then going back into the water.
That is
broad daylight, middle of day.
But how about orbs? Are they connected with UFOs or USOs?
Yes, most definitely. Orbs or spheres, we can call them how we want. These spherical, often glowing types of objects are frequently seen. It's one of the most common shapes, without a doubt. And typically, the color is some version of orange. Could be a yellowish orange, could be more of a reddish orange, but that is by far the most common color that is reported, although other colors have been reported. And they often are seen coming out of the water. I have a case from 1825. It's a good case. A British Royal Navy ship is coming back from Hawaii. It's in the Pacific Ocean. And it's 3:30 in the morning on August 12th, 1825. We have the name of the individual who wrote about this at the time. His diaries were published shortly after that. And there's this one weird thing he puts in his diary where this reddish glowing object, 3:30 a.m., comes out of the water, lights up their wooden sail ship brighter than daylight, where he said you could pick a pin off the deck from the amount of light. So this red glowing object comes out of the water, lights up the area, sinks back down, and then comes back up a second time, and then lowers back into the water. And the thing about that is the man who wrote it, we have his name, it's Andrew Bloxham. He was very rational about it. He wasn't trying to go to the newspapers and come up with some big hoax story. He's just writing it down the way it happened on the ship out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in the dead of night. But then there are, almost identical cases reported a century or a century and a half later. So they happen a lot. One orb case that I'm just thinking of, it's one of my favorites, is a Soviet case from 1965 in the Red Sea. And this was not a Soviet Navy, but it was a commercial vessel. So they're out in the Red Sea, and it's daytime, and they see this fiery sphere come out of the water. And it, in fact, it created this pillar of water below it. And the object hovered above the water. It was lighting up everything around it. And I'm not sure how that sighting ended, because that wasn't made clear in any of the reports that we have. But we are made to understand that the Soviet authorities took it quite seriously, and it was mentioned in a number of Russian publications. So these things, they're out there. These orb objects are seen quite frequently.
That is so interesting and kind of scary in a way. You know, I got one last question to ask you here before we end the show. Could there be any active underwater Cold War between human and non-human intelligent operating beneath the oceans?
Well, that's a great question. And I liken it to a kind of dance. You know, they see us, we see them. And I think there's an adaptation going on by both sides. You know, it's often easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, these operators of these craft, they just do what they do, has nothing to do with us. They don't need to worry about us. I don't think that's the case. I think during the course of the 20th century, they clearly would have noted that humanity is getting better and better and better at going into the ocean and also putting satellites up and just monitoring the planet. I mean, you think of the difference between the year 1900 and 2000, and it's incredible. So one of the things that I noticed, one of the factors that I tracked was, did the account happen in the daytime or at nighttime? You know, something that simple. And what I noticed was that up until the maybe late 1960s, there was a slight advantage of accounts in the daytime. But after that, an overwhelming preponderance of them, and to this day, have happened at night, under cover of darkness. So, and with military vessels, it's almost like 90%. It's really quite extraordinary. So there's a kind of behavioral, there was a behavioral change, I think, that happened during the late 60s. And whoever they are, they can seemingly tell the difference between civilian and military craft, because the military ones are encountered far more frequently at night than civilian, and they are far more likely to have electromagnetic interference when they have these encounters.
Well, they're probably scanning, you know, the ships.
They're probably, yes, scanning the ships. Yes, I think that's probably right.
That is.
So is there a Cold War? I mean, yeah, in a way, I think there is. I mean, there's some kind of, I don't know if I would call it hostile activity per se. I mean, maybe it is, but there's definitely a confrontational aspect to a lot of these encounters.
I'm just scared one day we're going to manage to attack one. When it comes too close to one of our ships, we might respond wrong. And who knows?
I think this has been attempted. I think there have been attempts where there has been weapons at least attempted to be discharged. And, you know, in fact, there are a couple of cases where I have this in my first volume here off the coast of Vietnam in the late 60s. You had a gunner on a ship actually firing rounds at this spherical object that was half submerged and half emerged from the water. And it wasn't, they wondered, is this a Russian thing? You know, they didn't know what it was. He starts firing on it, and the bullets just flew right off of it. I mean, pinged off of it, had no effect. And then the object just submerged and just zipped off.
Yeah, it probably annoyed it. Now, do you have a website you can share to the listeners? And where can they find your fantastic book and your podcast?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I have a website called richarddolanmembers.com. There's a paywall for some of it, but a lot of it's free stuff. People can just go there, check it out. I have a lot of things on there. I've been working it for years. So it's richarddolanmembers.com. I have a YouTube channel, which is just called Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. It's very active. And my book is available on Amazon. It's available as hardcover, paperback, and ebook. Audiobook will be out very soon. I'm just talking with the reader of that. So, and that will be the case with the other two volumes when they are available.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Richard, for coming on. You know, I really appreciate it. You're somebody I've been trying to get on for years. I'm glad we finally did it.
Same here. It's been a pleasure, Gary.
Okay, my friend, you have a great weekend, will you?
Thank you very much. Take care, and thanks to all of your listeners.
Okay. Well, JC, what do we have coming up next week?
Well, Mr. Gary, we have fantastic shows coming up next week. That's what we got going on. Matter of fact, starting off on next Wednesday, we have Floyd Wills coming on talking about ancient giants. But you know what? We have a show tomorrow night, too.
What are we going to be talking about tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, Mr. Paul Vachette is going to be on talking about the disclosure paradox and everything that goes with it. Military secrets and what do they know and what don't they know, and kind of parallels his military career.
And next week, what subject are we going to be talking about, touching on?
Well, Wednesday we talk about the ancient giants with Floyd Wills, and then we're going to go...
Thursday.
Thursday, rather. Yeah, that's right. We moved to Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And then Friday, we have Mr. Linville Logan coming on. Now, he was a former UAP task force member, and he also created an app to document UFO evidence. So he's got some really fascinating stuff to talk about.
And again, check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Do me a favor. Please leave a comment after the show in the comment section on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. That's very important because our sponsors look at that. And we got a lot of things going. Again, the last 2 days, my game has been a little off. It's because I've been really ill. And I've been sleeping all day, but I made a point. I was going to be here tonight for Richard Dolan, and I made it. So I hope that he answered a lot of questions about USOs going underwater and all that stuff. Maybe bases. Can you imagine one of these days we might run into one of these alien bases underneath?
Yeah, I think we have, and we've called it something else over, in the last years ago, or through the years, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, okay, everybody, I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm out. We will catch you next Thursday. Well, no, tomorrow, Saturday. See, I almost forgot about that. Talking about UFOs again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We're going to take some calls and all that. Tell your friends about us. Everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case.